Hello friends, this is Thaddeus from Going Nerdy, and we finally got C-3PO's kit. Now, if you haven't looked at the actual forum, you may be hearing some wrong things, so go ahead and jump to the forum or just stay tuned and we're going to go through the kit here. I'm not going to go through every individual aspect of the kit, but what I want to do is talk about what I've not really heard a lot of people talking about on YouTube right now, and that is C-3PO makes the Ewoks amazing, and he makes R2-D2 just that much better. And first and foremost, guys, he is a legendary character. All legendary characters are at least solid. Most are really, really good and have been in one form or the meta or another. And so that's definitely something to keep in mind. But what's interesting about C-3PO is, much like R2-D2, is the tags that he has. He is a light side character, support character. That's not shocking to anyone. He's a droid, again, not shocking. He's Galactic Republic, Rebel, and Resistance. All three of those we are familiar with. Those are the same three tags that R2-D2 has. Now, his kit essentially helps those three factions with the bonus edition of Ewoks. And what I want to do is just talk about, my goodness, what they do to the Ewoks. Now, let's face it, guys. The Ewoks view him as this golden god, as a character who is just phenomenal, or as a deity of sorts. So why wouldn't he be doing phenomenal with an Ewok team? Now, if you haven't heard, yes, he absolutely has 5 unique abilities, which is really kind of cool because that means there's only 2 things that you need to worry about during the flow of the game if those abilities are maxed out. And that is his basic attack and his special attack. His special attack has a cooldown of 3 and not 4. And his basic attack throws on this new thing called Confuse, which, let's face it, is kind of what C-3PO does. Kind of ironic that someone who's skilled in that many languages confuses people as often as he does, right? I mean, I think that's probably one of the running jokes, whether it's meant to be or not, that is C-3PO, right? He is just confusing. Why is he in everything? How does he keep getting put into everything? I think C-3PO is actually the embodiment of the Force, kind of like going around and manipulating things in his own will. I actually don't believe that, but that would be kind of a fun theory to explore. No, so his basic ability, depending on how many stacks of confuse or confusion that the enemy has on him or her, it allows, it stops buffs, it stops counters, assists, and bonus turn meter, and it really, every time a basic is done, it increases your enemy's cooldown. Now, that's not necessarily what happens in a raid, but that's powerful, guys. Think of all of the times that a basic ability is used in conjunction with, like, the Jedi, with the Sith, with the Ewoks. It happens a lot, and this is going to be pretty awesome. Now, oh my goodness is pretty cool. It does potency up and stealth for 2 turns when it's zated, and does this thing called Translate. Now, Translate is one of these mechanics that's going to be really useful. It's very similar to, it's a mechanic kind of like how the Scoundrels have Prepared and how the Bounty Hunters have their contracts. It is very similar to that. It acts more along the lines of, like, it acts more along the lines of secret intel from BB-8, but it's really pretty freaking cool. And essentially, what this does is, the more stacks you have on you, you get different buffs. If you have 1 stack on you, you get 30% max health. If you have 2 stacks on you, you gain 15% critical chance. If you have 3 stacks on you, anytime C-3PO uses his basic ability, decrease this character's cooldowns by 1, which is awesome. But here's what's interesting, guys. This is why I think this is awesome for flat out an Ewok team. First and foremost, the 4 factions that C-3PO really helps right? You have the Ewoks, the Rebels and the Resistance, the Galactic Republic, and the droids. And I have them in that order. I do think that he helps the Ewoks out the most, and you'll see why here in a moment. You can argue with me, and I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment in the section below. Because Ewoks are going to get the biggest boost. Now, let's face it, they need the biggest boost. That's just the case. Ewoks haven't been very useful in a number of areas in the game. But right now, if you look at the bonuses just given to the Ewoks, right? With the translation mechanic, translation is going to give anytime he uses this ability, C-3PO is going to cause an AoE effect, right? It's essentially, or he's going to call in an ally help, right? And so he's going to throw that ally buff on the Ewoks. Now, the Ewoks already are fast, already help each other out a ton. This is going to be one additional time when more people are just going to be able to attack. More people on the Ewok crew or on an Ewok team are going to be able to attack. Essentially, you're saying all of your team attack with a Chief Chirpa, all of your team or some of your team attack with Wicket or when Wicket's in play. And hey, C-3PO, make all the Ewoks fight again. So 3 times potentially in a turn, you're going to be able to use all of your attacking abilities to attack your opponent with the Ewoks. I think that is a very potent ability, especially considering some of the other things. And as I mentioned, translation gives 30% health gain, 15% critical chance, and reduces cooldowns on a C-3PO basic, right? Nothing to scoff at there. Protocol droid, that's the thing that gives the translation. There's another aspect that gives translation as well. Intermediary, this is what's interesting. It gives 15% protection up. That's one of the byproducts of it. 10% defense penetration as a base. That's, unless I'm reading this wrong, then as a base, all allies get that 10% base defense penetration. Then Ewoks specifically get 20% per stack of translation. They can get up to 3 stacks of translation, which means they can get up to 70% defense penetration with 3 stacks of translation. That is awesome. That is phenomenal. Jump down to cyborg relations. Plus 10 base potency for all allies. They can inflict an unevadable potency with a base attack. Now think about, with all those Ewoks going multiple times, it's going to throw expose so often. It's going to hit and get rid of and hit and get rid of and hit and get rid of. And it's going to deal a ton of damage. Then you get the Fretful Mediator. Again, you got that 10% crit damage as a base. That then stacks with again 20% critical damage per stack of translation, which again would equal, if I'm reading this right, 70% critical damage on a basic attack. That is phenomenal, guys. That is really effing cool. I'm really excited about that. With Fretful Droid, they do an unevadable offense down on the target enemy for 2 turns. So there's a lot of potential here for the crew like the Ewoks. They're fast. They may not hit the hardest, but now they're going to increase and potentially hit harder, do more turn damage manipulation or turn meter manipulation. This has a lot of potential here. And it's interesting. It is absolutely fascinating that when they gave the Game Changers footage to use, they don't show the Ewoks with C-3PO. And the Ewoks really get a lot of buffs here. Now, moving on, I think as far as this goes, the Murder Bears are going to be more resilient. They're going to hit harder. They're going to live longer. They're going to do more turn meter reduction, and they're just going to stay around longer, right? I'm excited about this. I'm excited to see how this plays out because, one, C-3PO, under like a Tebow lead in the Rancor, it's just going to happen. That's going to be awesome. And of course, it's going to be phenomenal. Rancor is not something a lot of people care about, but it's going to be good for C-3PO for all of the Ewoks. 2, I think it's possible that we could see some kind of heroic tank raid auto function with C-3PO on a team. Maybe the C-3PO team that we need is maybe a CLS, Raid Han, C-3PO, I don't know, Chewbacca and R2. That would be a phenomenal team that would do a great deal of damage and would really be, I think, a great mix. Now, it would be difficult, I think, because of the whole mechanic that you have to deal with the P1, having to adjust for Grievous's turn meter manipulation. But it seems like that's not going to be something that's going to be as effective. So I'm really curious to see how that plays out. I think that now you have a solid second P1 and P2 Sith Triumvirate raid team with the Ewoks. I'm not entirely sure how that's going to work out. Definitely think you're going to be able to do some solid damage in P1 because of the whole turn meter manipulation mechanic and the expose. I mean, you have a ton of Ewoks just running around exposing themselves. That's a startling image, a scary image to think of. And I just don't think Nihilus can handle it. I'm just spitballing here. I also think this is going to be solid in the Grand Arena and Territory Wars, specifically on the attack, or maybe on the attack. I don't think this is going to be as effective for a defensive team, but for an offensive team, I think it's going to be very solid. And the reason I think that is because that whole ability where C-3PO, if there's no other attackers, he disappears like Yoda. I think that's beneficial. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, the chances of that happening with the STR or with other areas, it happens to me all the time. I'll send in a team with Yoda and he disappears once everyone else is dead. It's like 60% of the time for me. And maybe I'm just blessed. And I know that I'm blessed. I live a pretty blessed life. It's great. But I don't know. I think that it's very possible that we could see that kind of connection there. I want to see how he plays out in Arena. I'm not rightly sure. I think the right team could definitely be very beneficial for him. I think people are going to play around with it and lose some ranks. As far as Arena, I don't think he's necessarily the most important. I think he's going to be effective. And I think he's going to make certain teams definitely more viable. And this whole rock, paper, scissors, I think it's possible that the Ewoks could introduce or be introduced to the rock, paper, scissors of the Arena. It's not likely, but some of the footage that we did see was convincing. Now, again, we don't know what the opponents were looking like. We don't know what mods they had on them. There's a lot of aspects that, really are up in the air here, but they were able to, teams with C-3PO were able to defeat Traya and Revan and a number of other characters. And maybe an Ewok team is going to be the new meta. Fingers crossed. And I know I just lost half my viewers by saying that, but it's possible. And we'll see, right? Because time will tell. I expect Friday and Saturday and just this whole weekend actually to be a whole mess of people gearing up, leveling up C-3PO and throwing the Zeta on him and really trying out to see what he looks like in Arena. Now, as far as R2-D2, now everyone, a lot of people aren't really giving him a lot of credit here. R2-D2 has the exact same thing. Everything that he's given to the Ewoks, he gives R2-D2 just to a lesser extent. Instead of 60 or 70%, which again, I'm not entirely sure on, he gives at most 40% and then at least 30% damage, potency, defense penetration, critical damage. I mean, all of those things are great. Plus he gives the whole idea of there's that unevadable expose. There's a lot of really great benefits to this character. I don't think that C-3PO is going to be the replacement for the OG Rey. I think it's very much possible that we could replace Resistance Trooper with C-3PO on a JTR team. I don't know. I want to play around with that, but I think it's going to be solid. Now, again, what really excites me about this character is all of the sudden we now have quite possibly two very strong Resistance teams, right? You could have a solid Resistance team, a JTR team running it the way that it does. Then you could use Poe and Finn, C-3PO, and two others to make a secondary team. And I think that's going to be beneficial in a number of different areas. I'm really excited to see what this looks like, guys. I don't know. Because the footage we saw was definitely footage they wanted us to see. So I'm going to leave it at that. This has been a longer video than I typically make. I mean, this is like back in the day going nerdy, when my videos were always like 20 plus minutes. But let me know what you think. If you are going to be able to get C-3PO on the 14th, are you excited? Are you more excited than you were now before? Are you less excited? Are you angry? What are your feelings? Let's talk about your feelings. Tell me what's going through your heads, guys. What's going through your minds? Are you excited for the most annoying character in all of Star Wars? All of Star Wars. Yes, I honestly don't think that Jar Jar holds a candle to C-3PO. My opinion, yours is going to be different, I'm sure. What do you think? Leave a comment in the section below. Like, subscribe, share. Check out goingnerdy.com. You feel like supporting the channel, visit us at the PayPal linked below. This has been Thaddeus from Going Nerdy. Join the conversation, and as always, my friends, stay nerdy.